Hey everybody, it's Gail, and this is episode 62 of Errata-Hate, and today I want to talk to you about a tool you might not have ever considered a crochet tool, but it has saved me tons of time, and that is craft epoxy. You can see I've got a rather well-used tube here. So craft epoxy, if you've never worked with it, epoxy is just a really strong glue. It's got the same amount of hold as super glue, if not better. But one, you can buy it in big tubes, and two, it doesn't dry out, so pretty nice. The fumes can be about the same. Definitely work with this with a window open or a fan on, just take care of yourself. But I wanted to show you some of the ways that I use it and then give you a couple of tips for how to use it well, so that if you, like me, are not really much of a sewer, you have a way to, put on appliques and all of that fun stuff. So first of all, let me show you, not that one, that one's next. I have this jacket I just finished. This is a Captain Marvel jacket. I've got it unzipped because I'm going to show you different parts. So this half of the star here, so there are two pieces. And this star is made of a half circle and then a bunch of different triangles. And I might have a pattern for this jacket up by the time this video goes up, but I don't promise those sorts of things, really. I learned from my halter top. But anyway, so sewing this star on was very difficult for me because it's a very floppy thing. This blue outline here is not holding this star in place. It never has. This is just a bit of detail. Because it's a bunch of different pieces all sewn together. It gets very floppy. It kind of goes everywhere. I have to be careful to make sure it lines up where I want it to. And this is where the epoxy comes into play, because what I can do is take this whole floppy star, I can lay it where what I did for this one especially, was I did this outline here on the edge of this half circle, and then I laid it out exactly where I wanted it, held it down for a few seconds so it would stick, and then I started putting the epoxy on all the little points and laying them out exactly where I wanted, so it gave me a lot of control. It also was much faster than sewing because I'm not very fast. The other way that I use it on jackets, and this is honestly one of the best things I've learned, is I use it on zippers. Now, looking at the zipper, it is sewn in here. It is sewn in all the way through. It's just there's yellow thread here because this is yellow. But if you come in close with me here, all of this stuff that kind of looks like a water stain, that is the epoxy that I put on the zipper. And then I laid out the edge of the jacket against the zipper where I wanted it. And once everything had cured, and we'll get to that in a minute, I went back in and then put the stitching in. And that does two things. First of all, it gives me a very good base for a zipper that's going to stay put because epoxy is strong. Second of all, it made it much easier to sew the zipper because I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. I didn't have to worry about sticking myself with pins. I didn't have to worry about bunching things up. Now, it is not evenly distributed on the zipper, so there were places that the epoxy had not really stuck, but there was enough integrity of the epoxy holding it that it didn't make a big difference. So up here on this yellow piece, it was a little bit looser, but because it was holding here and it was holding here, the fact that this was a little looser was not a big deal. There was no concern that I was going to bunch it up or fuck it up. So those are two things. The other thing I have found epoxy to be amazing for is when you have a bunch of little things you need to put on something. Like, for example, my Lucky Dog bag. This is based off Lucky from Hawkeye. He's also known as Pizza Dog, which is why he has a sliced pizza. But this is a lot of things. There's a lot of things here that I would have had to sew on. The ears, the eye, the two pieces attached to the eye, the nose, the pizza slice, the 3 pepperonis, and the straps. That's a lot of sewing. And I don't like sewing anyway. Just not my thing. I do this. And so having the ability to take the epoxy and use it, especially to get these details placed, is super useful. It saves me a shit ton of time. And now the thing about it is when you do it, you need to be careful of a couple of things. First of all, you need to let it cure, which just means put a piece of parchment paper down over what you just stuck on whatever. Put a couple of big books on top of that and walk away. And you have to let it cure overnight. And so you might be thinking, that seems like a lot of time to wait, but you can be doing anything else you want while you're waiting for this eyeball to finish drying. And that was a huge help to me when I was getting ready for GCE Portland 2018. That's a Geekcraft Expo. I was on such a tight schedule to make stock that being able to just glue parts of this together, put the parchment paper over it, put a couple of books down, it let me go to the next project while this one was still in process, in a way that I couldn't do if I was sewing pieces together. So that was great. And the reason I mentioned parchment paper is because this likes to stick to everything, but it does not stick to parchment paper. And so I highly recommend, if you're working with it, to get some parchment paper. You can get it in the baking aisle. And it's great for two things. First of all, when you squeeze this tube, it tends to kind of dribble out the end when you're working with it. And so being able to put it on something where you know you can get it back off of something, very handy. Good for parchment paper. The other thing is you don't want the epoxy to bleed through your project. So the jacket's easier to show for this. So, you know, I wanted this where it was, but I didn't want to have a lot of epoxy here, and I didn't want to have it on the inside of the jacket in general because it was laid flat so I could do this. And so what I did was I laid down a piece of parchment paper underneath where I was going to put the epoxy. I did my work here. I put that other piece of paper on top of it, parchment paper on top of it, and then I was able to come in, you know, put the books down and walk away. And so I definitely recommend putting some weight on it when you're leaving it to cure. I have a bag that I glued a bunch of stuff to that I did not leave it. I did not put any weight on it to let the stuff cure, and I had a couple of patches fall off the first time I used the bag. Because the thing is, what the weight does is it just really helps form that bond between whatever you're sticking together. So that is craft epoxy. If you have any questions, you know, drop them down in the basement. By the way, you can get this in any craft store. I actually buy this at the grocery store because it's in the craft section. It's like $5-6 a tube. A tube will last you a long time. So, you know, that's today's videos. So as always, if you enjoy what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, all that fun stuff. And I will see you guys next video for a how-to.